Um, the on this agenda today, we are going to eliminate, if it was posted, item 1 and item 2 on the regular agenda. We're going to move the minutes to item number between 7 and 8, and we'll start with a Happy New Year, and hopefully that planning and zoning will try to do its job for 2013 to make this a prosperous and developmental year for all the work that was done in the past, and all the meetings we had last year, that they'll come to fruition and our developers will move forward with all the items they brought to us last year. The first item on the agenda is a preliminary plat. It's to consider a minor subdivision plat for Stone Ridge Addition, generally located southeast of 8th Street West, between I-94 Business Loop and Dakota Boulevard. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward and let us know what you'd like to do.
Good morning. Shane. Do we have any suggestions? I'll stand over here. Apparently it's me. I do. I think that's it. That's it? That's the problem?
Let's try it again.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good morning.
piece in the existing subdivision would be paved.
Okay.
Correct.
Prior to developing that or prior to building?
Prior to building, correct.
Just let everybody know, just have some patience, we have our IT person trying to correct the audio issues. Turn off your earplugs and it'll be better.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Ellison?
I would really like to have Steve Josephson probably come up and explain a little bit about what we're looking at in the county as far as an assessment district, or explain a little bit about it. We do not at the present time have any policy in regards to it, so I'd like to have Steve come up and explain a little bit in
Mr.
regards to it.
Josephson?
Steve Josephson. I guess at this point I'll be the county planner, so Steve Josephson, county planner. As Commissioner Elkin was saying, we've just started some preliminary discussions about creating a special assessment district, probably similar to something like what the city of Dickinson has, where the property owners in an area would be, if you had 51% of them would agree to pay for, they would have a special assessment for a limited period of time to pay for the paving of all the roads within that area. The county currently does not have such an ordinance. However, the Century Code in North Dakota does not prevent counties from doing special assessment districts. In fact, from my research, a number of them have. So the talks here have just been very preliminary. I know Commissioner Elkin and I have talked about making a presentation in front of the Stark County Commission to get that process going, but to start that, it is going to require a public process. It's going to require a new ordinance with public notice, that will need to be approved by the county commission to get to that. So at this point, that we still haven't had the discussion yet with the county commission. There has been discussion with Commissioner Elkin and other county commissioners about this at this point. So the thing I was wondering is, at this point, and I'll ask this, is there a condition of this final plat that the developer will be responsible for paving? Is that something that's necessary at this point, is to include a condition saying that the developer would be responsible for paving their new road? And I don't have any other comments at this point.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I guess,
Elkin.
Steve, right now, we do have policy that clearly states that any development within a new subdivision, industrial subdivision especially, that those streets have to be paved, so.
Well, within the ETA, ETZ, that's
Yeah,
correct.
within the ETA. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that within and just to clarify, I think within our new subdivision regs for the county, I think it allows for the opportunity to do a special assessment, and definitely state law, the Century Code does. So that'll be something that'll be coming down the road. Well, it's up to the county commission to decide, but at least a proposal will be discussed at the county commission level, and we'll see what happens at that point. Anything else?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments at this time? So, to get it clear, at this point in time, we can require or request that the roads be paved. I think on this property, in the past, there was a requirement of a certain type of roads being covered with maybe aggregate at one time. That probably wasn't done.
Well, it's a definition of hard surfacing. What is the definition? And in the past, the prior developers had agreed to hard surface. However, there's scoria streets out there at the present time, and scoria streets are not really conducive to heavy truck traffic, and that's what you see in this industrial park. Those streets will have to be, at some point, and the county may have to just end up paying for that whole thing until we can put a special assessment policy in place. There's a fair amount of buildings out there, a fair amount of customers out there really to the county, fair revenue stream, but it's not enough at the present time for the county to justify going in there and trying to pay for something we cannot not afford. That's why we're looking at special assessment district. The past, and Andrew's right, 1979 is when that project was put together or was approved. A lot of it was word of mouth, too. When they got to some point in time, they were going to pave those streets. They never did. Since then, most of it's been sold off to someone else. So, but we do want to see within the ETA, any streets within the ETA in an industrial subdivision be paved. New development-wise. Okay?
For my comments on it, I would hope we would consider the wishes of the county as we move forward with this. What the county wishes are, I think, are paramount. Any other comments, questions? This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who'd like to make comment on this. And this is a final plat, is that correct? Please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make final comment?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkin?
I want to make a motion to approve the final plat for the I-94 Industrial Park 3rd Edition.
Want to mention the paving? Want to mention the paving?
To include the paving of the new street development, Andrew. That's going to be a part of it. That'll have to be a condition in there, I suppose.
I'll second.
Been a motion and a second. Any discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended. Thank you, Andrew. Next item on the regular agenda, it will be item 5, is a special use permit. To consider a public utility special use permit to allow for a substation on a property zoned AG agricultural in an area generally described as the northeast quarter of Section 8, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Morning, Commissioners. My name is Dan Ulbrich from Montana Dakota Utility. This property was purchased back in 1986 during the last oil boom for the purpose of building a substation. During that time, the load growth didn't require the substation be built, so plans were kind of put on hold. Recently, with all the activity going on in this area, through our planning and study process, we've determined that this area has increased greatly and the substation is now required. So we are looking to build a substation. I think it's East Broadway or East Boulevard Avenue. It's located on approximately 7 acres. We won't be taking up the whole acreage, but we'll be taking up a good portion of it. I guess, are there any questions that I can answer?
Sure. Any questions for Mr. Albrecht? I guess not, Mr. Albrecht. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I
okay.
do have one question.
Mr. Jackson.
I couldn't tell from the drawings just how close your fence is going to be to that road on the west. And that was really my only concern here,
That was a preliminary layout. Since I've talked to Steve Josephson, we've adjusted our lines and our grading area will be within the setbacks required. On the paper that you have, it's not actually, it's a lot closer to the road, but we will be moving it back to meet the 50-foot setback on both the north and west side of the roads.
So 50-foot setback from where, do you know?
From our property line.
to what? To the road center line or to the right-of-way line or?
From our property line to where we're going to grade, it'll be a 50-foot setback, so it'll probably be about 75 feet from the edge of the road to our graded area.
Okay, so you're saying the first 50 feet of your property won't be graded?
Right.
Okay. That was my biggest concern, Mr. Chairman. I also, I see it's a detail, but I see a 12-inch culvert in there, which I don't think works very well in our climate, but, overall, the request, I think, is fine.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Albert.
Thank you.
This time, if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this special use permit application, please feel free to come forward.
Al had a problem with that, too.
Any further comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Krieg?
I'm assuming that the 10 or 11 items of the staff recommendation has been passed on to MDU.
Do you have
They're
those?
aware of them.
Any other comments? Being none, I'd entertain a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning recommend approval of the public utility special use permit for transmission distribution substation as depicted in the materials as meeting the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, subject to the conditions that were listed in the attachment.
Thank you. Is there a second? And a second?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, Mr. Josephson.
Yes, this will be very brief. Steve Josephson, City Planner. Just to let you know, we did work with MDU on getting this, we did work with them on this and made them aware of the requirements in the Land Development Code concerning setbacks, this being a corner lot, and also in terms of landscaping and buffering and so on. And we did send them the conditions, well before the staff report was finished. Now, having looked over that, I am going to, and there are actually, as Commissioner Krieg said, there are 11 conditions here. I am proposing a slight amendment to number 5. At the end of it, the condition reads, the developer shall be responsible for all maintenance associated with the substation compound, and the roads. It says accessing the tower, that should be substation. I've got to admit, I took that language from a county cell tower, conditional use, so that's the only thing I would say is change that tower to substation. And I just wanted to correct that. And if you have any other questions, please let me know. The City Commission will adopt this by ordinance, and then MDU's been told they're going to have to go through the permitting process, the city's permitting process, in order to get this completed. And at that time, they'll bring in their landscaping plans and their final plans and so on.
Is that tower the 70-foot maximum tower or
Well, no, that's just 70 foot for the substation structure.
structure? Okay.
So it should read substation and not tower. That's on condition number 5. The last word should read tower.
If you were involved in that, could you possibly explain the selection of color? I noticed there's someone was going to be left up to someone's discrepancy on the color, the paint color of the paint to be used.
It's going to be approved by the community development director. Typically, these kinds of facilities are painted in such a way that they will not, you're not going to get like a hot pink or a neon color or something like that. You want something more that's going to blend in and isn't a distraction and will blend in with the area. But as I said, in the condition, the final color will be approved by the city.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I could add to that. I'll be the one making the selection, and what I require is earth tone colors that blend in. I've seen them where they stick out. There's no need that they need to do that. They could easily have it so that they blend into the horizon, so that it's not so that you soften the appearance of the structure in the substation. So it's a pretty simple condition, pretty simple for them to comply to that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Is that as amended in number 5?
Right, right. That was a clarification.
Yes.
We'll take that as a clarification. Thank you. This time, we have item 6, which is a first-time look at a ordinance, and it'll be an ordinance adoption. To consider an adoption of an adequate public facilities ordinance to establish criteria for developmental approval, including transportation, sewer, and water facilities. And at this time, I'd turn the meeting over to Mr. Curton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the first time that the commission has seen the revised ordinance. I inadvertently attached a prior ordinance that was sent to us from KLJ. I have done significant modifications, and I submitted that by email that I received from Mr. Tews yesterday. I hope that some of you commissioners were able to read that overnight. If not, I'm going to walk through it and explain the adequate public facilities ordinance. In essence, what this is doing is codifying what we've been talking about as part of our comprehensive plan and development regulations for the last year or so, making it so that the development community will have an idea or expectation that we require in order to approve plats or other developments, sewer, water, and transportation, for them to understand, the different ways for us to approve a project instead of providing it and then having to have numerous meetings and discussions with respect to that. So I hope that you'll find in favor of the ordinance. I don't think any of these things are going to necessarily jump out or surprise you, but I want to walk through that because I think the first one that I submitted with your packets would be alarming if I looked at it, because it deferred a lot of the decision-making to other authorities and required all the approvals to go through City Commission, and that was not my intent of that. If we did it that way, then, I've been in other communities that require it that way, but that would take a lengthy process, several months to go through that. And I'm not in favor of that. I think we have adequate staff in order to address that. This read through the purpose for the public itself. The purpose of City of Dickinson is to preserve the current and future city residents, to ensure that adequate facilities are available concurrent with each development. Section 1.3, the applicability, I would like to come back to that one last, and I'll explain the reason for that. The first 2 pages are talking about the definitions as part of the ordinance. I don't think anybody would have any necessary questions with respect to that. If you do, please do interrupt me. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the administration and how it's applied. On the 3rd page, if you go to Article 3, Administration, it talks about this ordinance. The jurisdiction, this ordinance applies to all new subdivision, site plan, and building permit applications for new construction received by the Community Development Department after the effective date of this ordinance. And then it refers to how we would apply the traffic impact study. These are very standard language. This is something that's universal throughout other jurisdictions in the United States. This is a pretty simple process, and that most traffic people or engineers would be familiar with. And then 3.3, the development burden. The city shall bill the developer for all costs related to gathering this data and the preparation of reports to support the developer's application. That is consistent to our subdivision regulations, and then also that is consistent with what we do for regular building permits as well. Developer has to provide that information for us to be able to make calls with respect to, do they have adequate sewer or water, or do they meet the code. Final determination. This is the key portion of the ordinance, that if a road, sewer, or water is considered inadequate, then the project would be denied. If it's considered adequate, and adequate would mean that it meets the code, in essence, that those services are provided in a timely fashion, then that project can be approved. That being said, there's still additional requirements as part of the approval, but those are just basing it on transportation, sewer, and water with respect to those issues. The first part, Section 4 under roads, it talks about the traffic impact study, and I could walk you through how that is done. Section 4.2.1 refers to the prior traffic impact study of the ordinance. It talks about that you need to how you gather the information. 4.2.2 would talk about in the ordinance that looking at a new development that if it meets the code, then it meets the code. Determination of road adequacy, these are the key that I'll walk through. If a traffic impact study is considered not warranted or not required by the city engineer, and that would go back to the original one on page 1, then the transportation side of that would be deemed adequate. In other words, if it was a small project, let's say if you were putting in a Wendy's on an existing lot, we could look at that. We would know the traffic impacts of that associated are not going to be significant with respect to that. Therefore, a traffic impact study would not be required. If you were going to put in a Walmart, that would be a totally different story. That would apply. And then you go down to if it requires a traffic impact study. Traffic impact study in 4.3.2. If the study shows that our existing levels of service standards are E or F, and those are pretty standard ones, in essence your system is failing, then you would have to, if it's not E or F, then the traffic impact study would show that, and we would consider the road to be adequate. You wouldn't have to do any new improvements in order to accomplish that. If, due to a traffic study, we require that it shows that it is failing, that it has a level of service as an E and F, then at that point, the recommendations that are part of the traffic study would have to be incorporated within a binding agreement or a capital improvement plan, which we are working on as we speak to address roads. And if it's included in one of those two items, then we consider it adequate and you can move forward with that. And a binding agreement would be if Walmart came in and based upon the traffic study, if we required signalization to put a new light in or left turns or widening the intersection, something of that nature, they would need in order to do that for them to move forward. Underwater?
If I could interrupt, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Have we, can you give us examples, have we required traffic studies in the past?
Yes, Roar's development for West Ridge will require it for Myers as they move forward with their development in Pinecrest. So the bigger projects that are coming through, we're requiring that.
Okay,
And I believe we may have required it in the past for Walmart. I can't.
We did for Walmart. I know.
Yes. Yes, in the hospital and Sanford Clinic, the area up on the west side of town, we required those. Without a traffic study, it's difficult for staff in order to determine what the conditions are. You know, we could suggest conditions, but it's good to get an authoritative source in order to address those issues. Under roads, kind of the same process would involve under 5.1.1. It talks about on your application, you need to list, it says unit types. Unit types are defined as land use and, you know, in essence, what it's going to be. Is it going to be commercial or industrial? And the number of units proposed. We require that already as part of our building application. Equivalent dwelling units, if there's a residential feature with that, we would require that. And then there's water calculations that are involved. We require that as well whenever we're talking about new developments. Determination of water system sufficiency. This walks through the requirements that we would ask of these major developments. This shouldn't be of any surprise. This is in essence what we're requiring now under our new subdivision regulations, what we should have required in the past. But this would be for our larger developments or for our newer subdivisions. I don't know if you have any specific questions with that. It's pretty standard for that. And then down on the applicability, 5.2.2 walks you through if that system is determined, you have a utility representative, and that could either be a consultant that the city hires, or that could be the city engineer. Upon reviewing the above information, if the city engineer realizes, or if it's revealed that there is not enough water capacity for that, then it walks you through A, B, and C on how to rectify that in order to provide an approved project. The first one would be if the capital improvement plan is in place, in which we know that water is going to be available within a specified period of time, then that project can be considered complete. I did not enumerate or state in here what I felt would be considered in the last part of the paragraph are in place. That's something I'll have to discuss with the City Commission and also get your input. My personal feel is for roads, to consider that you have adequate roads, if it's shown on the capital improvement plan, if you are having an existing gravel road, and we show in our capital improvement plan that within 2 years, we will have that road funded and built, I think that the adequacy requirement would be satisfied. That would be left up to the city to complete that project. Sewer and water, I think sewer and water need to be in place within 1 year. So if the sewer and water is not available, and we have it in our capital improvement plan that we will be extending it to the site within 1 year, then I would feel that that adequacy requirement would be met. And that would be pretty standard to what we have today. You know, you could come in today and get a building permit or come in with a subdivision. Before you could occupy any of those lots, any new construction, you would have to have sewer and water available anyway. This would just provide a greater mechanism for us to ensure that those issues are addressed. The second part of that, number B, would be talking about a binding agreement in which the developer would, if it's not part of a CIP program, then the developer would come through and fund those water improvements himself. In essence, that would be if we were not going to provide sewer or water service for 5 years. And if you've been paying it in our comprehensive plan, we have noted that there's many areas within our city that are deficient now, and we're going to probably have to be very selective on future development because we only have so much infrastructure to provide that. We're not going to be able to keep up with the demand that's out there. So we're going to have to prioritize our developments. So this would allow a developer, if he wants to provide those services, then we would have a binding agreement in order for us to move forward. Number C would be a binding agreement between the city and the developer in order to provide those services within that reasonable period of time. If you meet that requirement, then it's considered adequate. Have any questions with respect to that?
There are some things that are arbitrary. They're going to be left up to someone to make a decision. If there's a timeline for, say, a couple of years for a road to be finalized, or if there's a phased-in project and the water and sewer is going in phases. Those three things don't have to be adequate, actually functionally adequate at the same point in time. It's just that they have to meet a future adequacy.
Correct. What we're talking about would be, like I mentioned to you earlier, would be let's say a road. An example would be, and we could use that, would be maybe the Haroff annexation that we're all familiar with. Right now, we have State Avenue. State Avenue is a gravel road, doesn't meet our current standards. 34th Street's a gravel road as well. So under our current standards, we would not allow any development there. That being said, if the State Avenue was going to be funded and built in, let's say, 2014, then that transportation element would be met because the city would already have it on their plan that that road will be built, therefore we could approve it. We could approve it. We would probably limit the amount of construction in order not to have too much traffic until the roads are built. In our prior one without it, we would say you wouldn't have development. You're not, yeah, there's not sufficient road leading to it, so we would have denied the development. This would actually provide the flexibility in the negotiation between the city and the contractor. The contractor, I mean, the developer could look at it, see in our capital improvement plan when we feel that we'll be able to provide those necessary services, transportation, sewer, and water, and make a call. Do I purchase that property? Do I develop it today? And if their service is going to be provided within that reasonable time period, great. If they're not, then do I hold on the land, or do I wait and find another piece of land? We're not going to be able to continually approve projects like we've done in the past, because now we're finding out that we have significant areas that we have to improve within our system. Our system has reached, in some areas, close to capacity, and we're going to have to be very selective on how we move forward and how we fund projects.
Thank you.
And then on the next page, the sewer portion of that is the same as the water portion. I won't go in the same detail. It's essentially the same, in which you would provide the sewer report. The utility representative, either a private contractor or a staff member, report that to the city engineer. They would look at that. They would see if the existing facility for sewer is available. If it is, great, it meets that requirement. If it is not, then there's three alternatives. One is it included within the CIP program or capital improvement plan? If it is not, then you work on the binding agreements, or a binding agreement solely by the developer, or a joint agreement between the city and the developer. Otherwise, if you can't come to negotiations, then the project is considered inadequate with respect to those public facilities, and the project be recommended for denial.
Mr. Corton, those are fairly common agreements, aren't they?
We are doing those now as part of our development agreements. This, in essence, is codifying the language that we have for that. An example would be the developments that we've done with Roars, with the Myers and Suncrest, and many of the other projects in which we codify that. We would say, okay, we'll have sewer available at this period of time, and you break up the shares and you negotiate that. This puts it in the code, this puts it memorializes it in our municipal code, so that a developer could see their options that they need to do. This is nothing that I really see, and maybe I'm simplistic in my approach, because I've been discussing these with the developers. This, in essence, is the same things that we've been doing trying to do over the last year. We want to make sure that, that we have adequate transportation to it, that we have sewer and water available for the project. And this is just codifying it within an ordinance itself.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
I'm understanding this a lot better than I did last night, trying to go through it. And it seems to me just that we're just codifying what we've been trying to do, maybe inconsistent at times, maybe on a piecemeal basis. We're just codifying what we've been trying to do the last year or two. The other thing that comes to my mind, with all the water and sewer modeling, both the water and sewer modeling that we're doing, in most cases, most of that technical work will probably already be done. True? It'll probably be a much more simplified process to do these studies because of that modeling work we're doing.
Absolutely. The key on this one, Commissioner Jackson, would be getting our formal capital improvement plan, like we've been discussing in several meetings, to get that in there so that staff knows, and the developer, the public will be aware of what we're going to fund for the next several years and subsequent years thereafter. And then based upon that, this will make a lot more sense. I mean, if you come in with a project, we're going to require that the roads have to be paved leading to it. And if it's on a gravel road, well, you could look in the CIP and see if we have it as a capital improvement project. If we don't have that, then that project's premature. We just don't approve it. That's where we've been going. That's, in essence, the county requires that for new development within its boundaries, but we're talking about that we're a city, and we shouldn't be approving projects that have substandard roads leading to it. That's where we've been going over the last year or so, and that would be true with sewer and water. Now we know with our sewer and water models that we do not have an unlimited capability or capacity. We are left with some very, very tough decisions on how we prioritize projects and fund those, and how that affects the development community, and which projects can move forward and which ones will not be able to. And we just have a finite amount of infrastructure and capacity, and there's only so much that we could build within the next couple of years. So we're going to have to make some tough decisions in order to accommodate development. And till the CIP is finally done for the next couple of years, it's difficult for me to provide a lot of guidance for these developers, because it's really contingent upon what we could supply in order to their development. If they're adjacent to all these uses and we have capacity, then it's a simple issue. You know, they meet those adequacy. If there, as many of these are, part of annexations or extensions to our existing lines, we may not have that capacity for several years, and that development may have to wait.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Tews.
I guess my opinion really hasn't changed from yesterday. I have issues with every section of this that I read, and I know this is a first draft, but there's a lot of things in here that are redundant, and a lot of things that put more responsibility onto you guys than what we can handle at this point. That is covered in developers agreements already, and you've named some that we've done developers agreements with that have worked. I guess I'm not in favor of it in this form. If we want to go through section by section, I guess I'm just not in favor of it. I mean, as a developer, there's a lot of things in here that can't be answered. And as a builder, the first line is your 10,000 square feet. Is that a building? Is that a lot? What is it? I mean, there's just a lot of things in here that have inconsistencies that we don't have the staff to enforce it. So I guess I don't know the essence of what you think this is going to accomplish compared to your developers agreements that exist now. I don't understand that.
Well, our developers agreements are only referring to our subdivisions. This adequate public facilities ordinance would also apply to developments that would be within our current system, within platted lots. An example would be if you built a 10,000 square foot, let's say a 10,000 square foot warehouse building, steel frame warehouse building, little impact to sewer and water. And then you came back, and then we had a building permit, and it was industrial property, and then all of a sudden here's a gross simplification, a potato chip manufacturer comes in, extreme water user. Under our current code, I wouldn't have a way to deny that. But if that potato manufacturer came in, got their permit, we wouldn't have the capacity for that. Or by approving that potentially, we would be looking at problems up and down the line with respect to that. This issue would at least allow us the ability, if you're going from some existing project to a major project, that we could require some additional study in order to make a determination, either to approve it or deny that. This is one area for people to go to. As a developer, you're coming into the city, you can go to this ordinance and understand with respect to how the city is going to address a lot of these issues. I appreciate the concern with respect to staff, but this is how we're essentially doing it at this point. In many ways, we're flying blindly on building permits. We know that existing system capacity in many of these areas are questionable at this point. but the way our current code reads, we don't have a lot of teeth to either approve or deny. But if we know that if we had a significant water or sewer user in this particular area, it could be problematic for a system. This would allow us the ability to say, okay, you're coming in with your development, we're going to ask for some additional information, and we're going to have to base it upon our system and see if we have the ability to be able to do that. As a new development, this makes it easier for people to come in and understand. Okay, I want to develop 100 acres on the west side of town. I need to look at your capital improvement plan. I need to see, in essence, our comprehensive plan and see how this comes to play. This also provides the ability, makes it easier as you as a commission and as a city commission to review projects and to either approve it or deny that based upon the code itself. So it removes a little bit of ambiguity. Most of this is, in essence, what we're trying to do today. Some of it we have code for, and others we do not. And this kind of just buttons it up, makes it a little bit easier. I don't see that this is going to be too onerous, and I'm fine with the applicability portion to change that. That's why I wanted to come back to that at the very last. With respect to your comment on the 10,000 square foot, 10,000 square foot for a commercial building, I think is applicable. You know, if you're coming in, normally smaller commercial buildings, 5,000 square foot, 7,000, 10,000, depending on what the use would be, it should require maybe an impact study, a transportation impact study. If you are going to be a heavy vehicle user, we need to see how that's going to affect our system. You know, industrial, this would apply for industrial as well, 10,000 square foot. This is a building, not lot size. And this would allow us the ability to come back and look at it and say, do we have the facilities in order to accommodate that particular use? Otherwise, I think that we may approve some projects that unfortunately we may come back later and regret or may become problematic for our system. And that's all we're trying to do. We have this already. When you look at our current building standards, we require much of this information. It's more specified. This is more generic. I'm fine with massaging the language in order to accommodate this. This is very simplistic. In some ways, you may be confusing. I've read through it enough that I understand it, that maybe the first time or two, when you look at it, it could be that way, and I'm fine with modifying it. But I think this is needed, and these are things that we're trying to do, and as staff, I think we need to do. You know, we've really run into an issue with our existing system that we need to be aware of what we can handle. Otherwise, the potential liabilities that are associated with that. And all we're trying to do here is provide a codified version for us to include all the stuff that we've been talking about for the last year. I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Tews, but...
Mr. Chairman, it doesn't, and I guess I think it's not appropriate to put it in place before we have a capital improvement plan. I mean, if we want to go through the section by section, we can, but I just, I mean, 1.3 and 3.2 totally contradict each other. 3.2, you could read that in, if I was building a house or a garage, it would look like that. I would need, you know, to do all this and put the burden on the DOT. Who's the utility representative? Who do I call? That is the master of all utilities.
Utility representative is defined under the subdivision regulations. It's in essence, default would be the city engineer. Or...
And I understand that, but no offense to you people, I can't get a guy from MDU to return my call.
Well, that's not what we're...
Let's find a utility representative that's going to do a study with me to find out if I can power up a building or a house or a garage. So I think 3.2 and 1.3 need a little bit more than just massaging. I mean, it's, there's no consistency with this thing at all.
I could respond to that. The jurisdiction is not the applicability. The applicability is how this particular ordinance applies to specific projects. Probably I should have them next to one another. The jurisdiction is this referring as a holistic term, is referring to all these things, much the same as you would have that the city of Dickinson has jurisdiction over all the boundaries within the city, but a particular section of code is only referring to a section of that. But I can massage that, but there's a difference between the two. I wanted to, under the jurisdiction, to, maybe the traffic impact study should be under the applicability portion, because so people understand when that would come to play, and it's not a subjective call by the city engineer, that's a benchmark when that should come to a play. The applicability is like any other ordinance. That applies to these particular developments. If you have a development that's less than that, then you would not be required to do that. But I can massage that and change that. I have no problem with respect to that. This ordinance only applies to transportation roads and sewer and water. We're not referring to electrical or any other utility for that. And maybe I use a different term so that it's not confusing. So you're thinking I've got to talk to a cable, I've got to talk to Comcast or something to determine if I have adequacy to my development. That's not the term. That's not the intent of that, and I'm fine. I could change that and make that clear for everybody involved. So I have no problems with that, of massaging that language to go from there. And if we need further discussion, I'm fine with that. Mr. Tews, beyond those two issues, fundamentally, do you have a problem with the ordinance itself? Because I'd like to get your comments, and along with all the other commissioners as well.
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't think that there's areas of town that we can't service water, we can't service fire suppression, we can't service roadways. You take a look at 21st and 3rd Avenue up there, it's a huge problem. Where does the burden fall? Does it fall on Players Club that's coming in? Does it fall on Saks Motors that's coming in? You know, the problem started with Walmart and just got enormous with the oil boom rush up there. You can't make a left turn. I mean, so who's going to make the determination? I look at Article 4 and I look, why would it be the burden of the developer on the first line to take care of a problem that has been there for 2 years already? We just did a road project up there that didn't get resolved with the DOT.
Well,
That's why I think that it's really putting the cart before the horse with the capital improvement plan. And then you go down to section 4.3 and you read it, and okay, what if it's not a level EMF and a roadway? What do we do then? And we're gonna put that on the developer? We get a shady developer in here that he's gonna come back with this huge thing for you, or nothing at all. And at the end of the day, we're gonna be talking about it just like the I-94 part. It didn't happen.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead,
Mr. Jackson.
You know, the way I read this, that's just the point of the ordinance, is that the developer of whatever facility it might be wouldn't be responsible unless he was causing the issue, is the way I read this. But what I'd like to suggest, Mr. Chairman, you know, this is a significant ordinance. We're seeing it for the first time. I think it'd be good to let it go another month. And in that time, Mr. Catan could meet with Mr. Tews and any of the rest of us who might have some detailed comments like that, because I think some of them are appropriate comments. I find myself wondering if we couldn't add a section in here that would allow either Mr. Catan or city engineer, whoever, to be able to issue waivers. If a project is right next to an area that we have studied well already, say the water system, for instance, and we know that it's adequate, can't we waive the requirement for the study of water for that particular facility? You know, if we already have the answers. One of my concerns would be if it adds time to the permitting process. We know we've got bottlenecks there already. I get a sense that maybe that's going to get a little better this next year, but I don't know that, I guess. That would be one of my concerns. But I have a hunch that we're all fine with the concept here. It's just a matter of massaging some of the details. So let's give it to the next meeting to do that. And
I think you're correct on that. If you don't mind, Mr. Cortana, I ask Mr. Coley, are any of the definitions used in this ordinance new? Are these all accepted definitions that you would find in other ordinances? And, I think the answer is yes, but when we use the term, in place of city engineer, we use a utility director or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a common term? Can that can all be explained legally through other ordinances also it's found in other ordinances?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have some of the definitions that are incorporated into the current subdivision code. A lot of these definitions are new, and when we get to a second draft of this and ultimately get it codified into Chapter 34, we'll make sure that all these definitions are consistent with one another, so we have a unified ordinance. And this adequate public facilities ordinance also comports with our subdivision ordinance and comports with our zoning code, so that there's a unity in what we do, and there aren't those sort of contradictions or confusions within our ordinance. This is the first draft of this, and it will change between what you see now and what ultimately gets codified if the city commission does codify it.
Thanks, Mr. Coley. And Mr. Corton, on the question and the point that Mr. Jackson brought up about waivers, that can also be put in there, not necessarily a waiver, but in an exception to a study when it's so obvious that if a property is right next to another property that has adequate roads, sewer, water, and the engineering department feels that, yes, we can take on another 200 homes and provide sewer and water to them in this area, that we don't have to go through an extensive study, that can also be fairly clear also in writing.
Oh.
That the engineer is not, like I alluded to before, the arbitrary stuff. That it's not arbitrary, that it's fairly clear, the intent, that the engineer can say, okay, you met this part of it.
Oh, I would agree 100%, and I think that, in here, that there would be a portion of that, and that's why there's other ordinances that have adequate public facilities that are down to the gnat's eye, in essence, on how you do that, and I tried to simplify this, and maybe I simplified it too much, or by confusing the facts, that there would be some discretion based upon that. Now, we can't put a provision, we don't want the idea of somebody interpreting that the city engineer showed favoritism to this developer and this one because he didn't do it, even though he had background knowledge. We could put in here that the city engineer has the latitude, if he has existing data or, knowledge of this area and can support that those sections are no longer necessary or required. I think that would be fine, and we could add language to that effect. That's how we would, in essence, use this. There's many portions that can provide some discretion, and that's, in essence, what we can do. But I could put that in there in order to do that, so you don't have people look at, I have to do it on my project 3 blocks away, and you guys didn't require it on this one here. Well, we knew that this project, based upon a prior transportation study and based upon the comp plan, we had definitive proof in this particular area compared to the other one that we had adequate sewer and water. So yes, I could clarify that issue and put it in there that general knowledge based upon the city engineer and supportive data that he could waive or not require. I wouldn't say waive, not require certain portions of that, and I think that only makes sense, and that's how you normally apply that anyway. So I could change that.
But the crux of this ordinance is the city of Dickinson to maintain its integrity in these 3 areas. It's not to impede development whatsoever. It's a great tool for the city of engineers to keep the integrity of the city.
Well, yes, the comprehensive plan definitely spelled out that we are at a point in many areas in town, and Mr. Cheese has alluded to that already, that we have water pressure that is deficient, that there are certain areas in town that we have some hard decisions. We need to, as a jurisdiction, we need to make sure that we ensure that those issues are brought up to standards. And this is just another mechanism for us to evaluate our system, not to overload it. We have a finite structure. It's easy to look at sewer and water because they're below ground and say, yes, we have enough. But it's a different story when you have a backflow in the basement. And the reality of that situation comes to fruition. So we just want to make sure that we have a system. It's a network of interconnecting pipes and a road system above that, and that we are being good stewards with the money and the infrastructure that we do have.
Thank you.
So I will work on, Mr. Chairman, I'll work on with Nathan Peck, massaging that, not massaging it, rewriting it. I would love to get additional comments from other commissioners, or even Mr. Tooze as well, if you want to write out more information to me in the next near future, or submit that to me, or have a meeting. I'm more than happy. I think this is needed. I wanted to get this in here because I would anticipate that our capital improvement plan should be, at least for the first 2 years, and that's the real big section of our comp plan, should be approved, I'm hoping, within the next month or so. I have a lot of development that is wanting to move forward, and I have been doing my best to hold that off until I have a good view of what we have and what we will be able to supply in order for them to move forward on it. Otherwise, I will recommend a continuance on developments, because I know that we have some choke points, and we need to have those areas addressed before we move forward on approving projects. So this process would still take time to go through. I thought it was important to start it, but I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the document before anything. So I would encourage any other comments from any other commissioners. Mr. Tooze, do you want to meet or provide more written comments? I want to include everybody's as best I can.
I do, like Mr. Jackson said, I believe that in some form this is needed. I just think that it's a little premature before the capital improvement plan is done. And I think it could be simplified. If not 5-6 pages. I just, as a developer, I look at that, there's a hindrance. We're dealing with the increased land costs, housing needs, and we're putting all this on the developer, saying, all right, Mr. Developer, you come from San Francisco, you pay for everything, but we need commercial growth. We need retail growth in our town. We need to do something to attract them, not hinder them. I look at it as just another hindrance. I think it could be simplified in what the tool, give you the tool that you need to sit down with these developers and make those decisions of, can we service that facility or not? So, yeah, I'm all up for it.
Other commissioners, with respect to comments, direction?
I'd like to make maybe a general comment. We do need and want a lot of this development, and some of it's happening, a lot more needs to happen. It needs to be a partnership, and I think sometimes our taxpayers don't understand that when we encourage a retail or a commercial development, we're bringing more tax base, let alone the services and everything else that are brought in with that. Having said all that, we're meeting this afternoon to try to finalize what we need to do this next 2 years, and it looks like it's going to be about $50 to $60 million worth of work that we have to do. We can't afford that. We can't do that. We're going to have some participation. So I think the key word is partnership, and I think that's fair to expect some dollars from developers to help us build some of these facilities. It's going to cost the city money too, and we'll recoup that money ultimately in taxes. But there's a lot of chicken and egg going on here right now with how we get this stuff built, and we're just trying to find the right balance. I think this will help us do that.
Commissioner Diffley, I'd like to clarify, excuse me, there's nothing in this ordinance that is asking anybody in terms of submittal requirements. There's nothing in this ordinance that's beyond what we're already asking people to do, and that we have been asking people to do for the last 6 months. So I just wanted to clarify that for you. Some of your concerns, it sounded like maybe there was a difference between what we're asking people to submit as part of the processes versus what the results of that is in terms of construction and elements of their development. But I hope that clears it up, that this really is just a tool for us to point to what we're already asking people to provide us in terms of information and submittals, and to relate that to pointing it to the capital improvement plan and the comp plan. That's really the essential part of this. But in terms of traffic studies and water and sewer capacity information, we're already requiring that. That's in our current subdivision code, and people are providing it. So this is just a tool for us to point to the capital improvement plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Mr. Corton, anything else?
Well, I guess I'd just like to thank Mr. Corton for taking this on. I think anytime we can get awareness to the developers out in advance, I think it's a good deal. And, I think we're fooling ourselves if we're going to sit here and think we're going to write an error-free ordinance. So, I'm all for going next month, but I think maybe next month we need to maybe take a good look at it and move on with it. And, we know there's going to be changes down the road, and, there's things we're just going to have to live with. And there's so much going on. Again, we're not going to write an error-free ordinance here, but I think it's a good start, and I think we're heading in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Corton.
Anything else, Mr. Corton?
No, thank you for the comments, and I will work with Nathan, and I'll set up a meeting with Mr. Tews and any of you if you'd like to discuss that in greater detail, or shoot emails to me. And if you're thinking about it and you think, oh, well, what about this, or you can integrate that, just shoot an email to me with that as well. So I think it's needed. Most communities have something similar to that when you refer to a capital improvement plan and you're in a comp plan. And to me, this makes a lot of sense of combining it all in an ordinance for in essence where one person can go to understand how we're going to look at things. And so I am more than happy to do so. So I will move forward then to the next item, February zoning amendments. I'm not sure how far I will get then with working with the adequate public facilities portion, but I had discussed that with you in the past, that as part of a comprehensive plan that we were looking at rural residential and ag, at increasing the lot sizes to be more consistent with the county, and then more consistent with our urban service area. If you're outside of our urban service area, we don't feel that, or we don't look at that we're going to provide services to you for the next 20 years. Therefore, if you develop, you should develop at a more rural or agricultural level. I would like to come back with those proposed amendments. Rural residential to go from 1 acre minimums to 5 acre minimums, and from ag to go from 5 acres to 40 acres to be more reflective of the existing development patterns that have happened in the past. So I may bring those forth. The other issue that I may bring forth would be allowing residential in our general commercial district. Along Villard, we have a lot of existing houses that portions along Villard, east and west Villard, that existing houses that are 75, 100 years old, many of them, that years ago were residential, now have been rezoned to commercial, and many of those houses are finding it very difficult to refinance or to sell because now they're considered a non-conforming use. And without some kind of an assistance during this period of time, those houses will probably come into disrepair. Further, those lots are small. They're not your traditional commercial lots. And in order for them to be developed that way, you would need to have several houses to come together in order to provide enough parking, in order to make it a commercial lot. So singling out just a single residential lot and saying it has to be commercial if that house burned down, I don't think that's the intent that we want to go towards. So I would, I'm going to work with Steve Josephson and maybe go through a special use permit process for those, or just allow those to stay as is and allow them the ability to redevelop within a year period if that house burned down, or if it came to damage more than 50% of the value, and be considered, in essence, falling under a nonconformity provision. If they rebuild within a year, then it would be considered a permitted use. If they do not rebuild within a year, then that lot would have to become a commercial use. Something to that effect. I'm not exactly sure, and that would be more of a discussion item, but I'm running into more and more of those problems with the lack of housing that we have in the community, and I see a potential of those houses becoming disrepair if they cannot get financing, that I think we need to address it somehow, some way. And I'm open to suggestions if you have any initial feels with respect to that issue.
I think you're on track with that, because that strip was done a long time ago, where they had to, once the owner sold or ceased to occupy or was damaged, without the thought that any thinking ahead about how big that lot was going to be for commercial. It would be an awful small lot taken individually. But there has to be some relief for those people, or to let them continue on in the existing manner. That provision has to be there, because there is a demand, and if it's not big enough to satisfy a commercial need, and they're satisfied with living there, so be it. I think it's fine. I think you're going in the right direction there.
And I think what I'll do, Mr. Chairman, would use that as kind of a test case to see how things go. There's other parts of the city as well that could work. I don't want to necessarily, we are getting rid of our mixed-use zoning district. It's not, I don't see that it's really applicable anymore. We, in our comp plan, we talk about a PUD for that, and we establish standards for that. So, I'll come back with a removal of our mixed use in our current code. That portion should be directed towards the PUD portion with specific guidelines to address that. But I would probably label it as a different zoning district, and we could take a look at it, see how it's working out, and if we feel that we need to apply it to other parts of the city, we could do that as well. That would be my suggestion.
No comments. Any comments? Mr. Josephson.
Yes, and I just wanted to talk about a couple of other issues. Looking at at coming back to the Planning and Zoning Commission with a draft sign ordinance. There was some discussion about that, I know, at the end of the year in our December meeting. I just wanted to pass something out, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is what we'll propose, but these are some examples of what commercial signs could look like.
Mr. Josephson, were you involved in the suggestion and the requirement for the planting of the trees around the substation?
The trees around the substation?
That MDU proposed today?
We did tell them that they did need to do some landscaping around it, and meet the code in terms of landscaping, and that would involve the
I said that was very good.
Actually, I'll go a little further and say that since Ed Corton is our tree person here, I did counsel with him to get, some additional, guidelines, guidelines on that, but they do have to, that thing needs to be screened, so. So anyway, these are just some examples of what's been done elsewhere, where, where you have things like materials on the sign would match the buildings. There'd be certain architectural elements would match, would also match the buildings. That in shopping centers, there'd be a consistent theme and design. And those are some things that we can, that we can look at as, as part of this, and still, still you're protecting the rights of the the tenants or the owners to advertise and get their message out. And that's an important part of any sign ordinance. It's a balance of design and aesthetics while protecting the rights of the property owners and the tenants to be able to get out their advertising message. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the Renaissance Zone. We have got 2 applications in the Renaissance Zone, and the reason I bring this up is I had looked at some minutes from 2006. There was a Renaissance Zone application back then that involved the I believe it was the old Elks Club, and I had noticed back then that it had gone to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review. It's been a while since the city has gotten, my understanding is this is the first time we've had 2 come in at around the same time. And I'm just looking for some guidance is do you want those applications to come up, before you, for review and comment and recommendation?
As soon as possible.
Okay, well, we'll schedule then that means the February meeting. Thank you. Is there anything else you have for me at this time?
Are there any plans to plant trees on states north of the interstate?
I'll defer to Ed on that.
States north of the interstate. Yes, whenever we come through and look at widening that, yes. Part of our comp plan, if you notice that we had cross sections, and included within that, we want to make sure that any new collector or arterial would have landscaping as part of that. That would be something that we would integrate as part of the design of our developments. And so yes, I will be fighting for that, but we also have that as part of our comprehensive plan as well. I mean, if we're going to provide the infrastructure, the roads and the rest, we have a right as well to provide trees and make our travelways and our corridors as pleasing, but also we got to be fiscally responsible as well. There's a balance within that.
I do appreciate what you've done on just on the project with MDU, on their landscaping around their proposed substation. Anything else for Mr. Josephson or Mr. Cretan?
Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'd ask if there's anyone else have anything to bring before the commission. I'd ask for adjournment. Mr. Krieg, Mr. Hanson, thank you. All those in favor?